Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a few things to discuss. So first and foremost, just want to give a little bit of an update to the record schedule. So I'm not going to be recording an episode in between Kent State and South Dakota State, as I'm going to be traveling for Christmas and out of town. There will be an episode that's going to be happening in between South Dakota State and Oklahoma. That's going to serve as a little bit of a recap for those two games, as well as a preview for the Oklahoma game. So just as a heads up, that's what the record schedule is going to look like. I've given my tickets for these next two games to a friend of mine who is going to be in attendance, as I'm not going to be able to attend the games this weekend as well as this coming weekend. So just as a heads up, if you do follow me over on Twitter, I am going to have pregame threads written up writing about those games. So if you are interested, check those out. So let's get right in the show. First things first, North Dakota wasn't the best game. Right? I'm not going to be the first person to tell you it was the best game, but what I will tell you is the sky is not falling, right? Did we have some problems? Absolutely. Did Nate Oates experiment with some lineups in ways that I did not agree with? Absolutely. However, I still think that this team's best basketball is ahead of it, right? I think that part of our issue at the start of this game is I have no clue what the lineup was to start. Mark Sears, Darion Reed, Jaron Stevenson, Grant Nelson, and Cliff Amore should never be on the floor at the same time. Those four guys do not meld together even a little bit. At the end of the day, we've got to kick Jaron Stevenson out of the starting lineup. If you want to start Darion, I understand. LeBaron Philon should have started. LeBaron Philon should never come out of the starting lineup unless he's hurt or you're trying to prove a point. Nothing was ever mentioned about LeBaron being in trouble, but it's the only thing that makes sense as to why he was out of the starting lineup in this game. He's been incredible out of the starting lineup. He does not need to be removed. It just makes zero sense to me why he wouldn't be there. He had a good game, right? He scored 16 points. He's your third leading scorer. He has 2 steals, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, no turnovers, right? Like, he's a good player. He's got to be in the starting lineup, right? In my opinion, one of your better lineups is going to be him. And then I think when Chris Youngblood gets to playing, I think the lineup with Youngblood at the 3, where it's Mark, LeBaron, Youngblood, Grant, Cliff, I think is a good one. I think if you want to go a little smaller, you move Grant to the 5 and have Darion at the 4. Really like that lineup as well, right? There's a few things that you can do, but currently, Jaron Stevenson, there's zero chance this guy needs to be in the starting lineup. He's having more of the blues. This is apparently the only place he knows how to shoot a 3 is in Vegas. His defense is okay, but it's not good enough to start. He does not need to be in the starting lineup. A couple of guys that we need to talk about in this game. First and foremost, the guy that needs his props is Trey Eaglestaff, the leading scorer of the game and North Dakota's player extraordinaire. He has 40 points and just was making absolutely everything. In my write-up for this game, I talked about him. Obviously, he's their leading scorer. He leads the Summit League in scoring over 18 a game. Hasn't had a game under 12 this season, but you don't expect 40, right? 40 is just on another level, especially against a team like Alabama. Me and Hojo, Hunter Johnson, watched the game together at session, and the only guy who we could think that had a game like that against Alabama where you just could not stop him no matter what you tried was Ja Morant. Ja Morant had 38, I believe, against Alabama a few years ago, and he was the only guy who I've ever seen Alabama play and just not be able to stop no matter what you threw at him. And it was just a situation where if you look at this game and Eaglestaff has 25, right? So he still leads the game in scoring, but he doesn't have 40. He has 25. Alabama wins this game by 22, and there's less people saying the sky is falling, right? I think the reason everyone says the sky is falling, it's a 7-point win, Alabama's down at half, right? All those reasons I understand, but it's okay, right? You played on the road. You were able to get Grant the home game, and it was a really, really cool atmosphere. If you've not seen any of the videos put out on Twitter about all the people that showed up before the game, stayed after the game, his reception when his name was announced during lineups, just in general, it was an awesome homecoming for Grant. I think he really enjoyed being able to be back home, be able to play in front of his hometown crowd, be able to go back to North Dakota, right? It was a really cool game, right? But at the end of the day, these things happen, and the sky is not falling just because you didn't play well, right? I think a lot of it has to do with the lineups. You look at the lineups, and there's only 2 guys that played over 30 minutes with Grant Nelson and Mark Sears. LeBaron Philon plays 24. There's not another guy on the team that plays more than 19, right? So clearly, coach is moving around with the lineups a little bit and trying to see what works. I understand that, but you still need to play with some level of continuity to get your shooters more accustomed to how they're playing. I think the shooters that shot well in this game, outside of Mark Sears, of course, LeBaron Philon, Chris Youngblood, Houston Millett, all make 2 threes. But the guys I want to mention are the 2 quote-unquote newcomers, and it's Houston Millett and Chris Youngblood. Chris Youngblood goes 2 of 4. Again, the trigger is absolutely lightning fast. Funny enough, one of the ones he missed was actually one of his slower releases on the day. You can just tell his defense and how he's going to play. He did have a couple of turnovers, but it really, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think that in general, I think that Chris Youngblood, once he's back full steam, I think that he is going to be somebody that needs to be in the starting lineup and needs to play significant minutes. The 3-point ability, the defense, the knowledge of just playing the game, the length of time he has, it really jumps off the screen, and you know how well he's going to play. And then the other guy you got to talk about is Houston, right? Houston Millett, when you think of Houston Millett, you think of knockdown shooter. You think of a guy who does what it takes for the team to win, obviously pulling his red shirt to be able to play with Latrell being out. But it's a situation where the thing he did in this game that you don't expect out of Houston is he led the team in offensive rebounds. One of those offensive rebounds is a really cool play, and Blake Byler highlighted it, and I know some other people did as well, where Houston saves an offensive rebound going out of bounds, passes it to Grant, who kicks it back to Houston for an open 3, right? So that just shows that he hustle, right? Do what it takes for the team to win, and I think that's what Houston gives you. He gives you whatever it takes for the team to win. That's what I'm going to do. He's also a great knockdown shooter. I thought that his best threes come off of in rhythm, in transition, or just full-on in-rhythm threes. He's not great off the pull-up, but that's okay, right? In Nado's offense, you're going to get a lot of off the catch. And so I think that he's somebody that if he continues to give you those hustle plays, those type of offensive rebounds, those types of just doing what it takes for the team to win, he's got to find minutes, right? He's got to have minutes as you shrink the rotation, because he is, A, pull the red shirt for the Trelly, but also B, just does what it takes for the team to win and can hit knockdown shots, and has proven to be able to hit knockdown shots at a consistent rate, right? He actually closes this game out, which I don't think is something anybody expected, but closed this game out in the final minutes and, made some big plays down the stretch to help the team win the game. I think he also led the team in plus-minus, right? So this is just what Houston has done for you. You have to credit him. You have to give him the minutes, and really props to him, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the changes in KenPom, because I know a lot of people ask about it. Funny enough, Alabama actually went up in KenPom from an offensive standpoint, albeit slightly, because their 2-point percentage is now 5th in the country. Offense still sits at 6th in the country. The defense, as expected, did drop pretty substantially. They were sitting around 30-something. They're now sitting at 57. That's to be expected when you give up the amount of points that you did to North Dakota. Again, you gave up a 1.2 to North Dakota. If you give up, if he gives up 25 points to Eagle Staff, you're giving up a 1.0, right? So a lot of the scoring is going to have to do with just how elite Eagle Staff was in this game, and you have to give him his props, right? He made shots over defenders no matter who we put on him. We put size on him, we put quickness on him, and he just was making shots, right? So really props to him. Good offense beats good defense any day. Now, there was some poor defense as well. I don't want to say it was perfect defense by Alabama, but it was not all just bad defense, right? A lot of it was just really good offense. So that's what I want to talk about with that game. Like I said, the sky is not falling. It's going to be okay. But, it happens. And you live and you learn. And you won the game. And now you get back into Coleman. And you're going to see what happens. So we'll look a little bit at Kent State. The big things that we want to look at when you look at Kent State is this team has beaten every team they played outside of the top 100 in KenPom. They have played 2 teams inside the top 100 in KenPom, and those are Auburn, in which they lost by 23, and UC Irvine, in which they lost by 12, only scoring 39 points. The thing that you kind of look at when you look at Kent State that jumps off the page is how slow they play. This is an incredibly slow playing team. However, they also give up a ton of assisted field goals, right? So this is a game where if Alabama can hit some shots, I think that the shots are going to be there, right? Because if you look at Kent State and you see what jumps off their KenPom page at you, they give up a ton of threes. They give up a ton of assisted field goals, like near bottom of the country. There's only about 7 teams lower than them in the country. They play incredibly slow. They've actually only had one game that got up into 70 possessions. Their Auburn game only got up to 63 possessions, right? So Alabama's going to struggle to get the pace moving in this one. Expect it to be a slower paced game and inherently a slightly lower scoring game because of how slow Kent State's going to play. This is one of the worst offensive teams in the country from a effective field goal percentage standpoint. They're only about 44%, which is good for 337 in the country out of 363 teams. So again, this is not a super efficient offense. Their defense is much better than their offense, but again, as I mentioned, they do give up a lot of assists, right? So if Alabama is able to knock down shots, I think the shots are going to be there, right? What that tells me is the shots will be there. The question is, will Alabama be able to hit said shots, right? That's usually what you see when you see something like that, is the team is decent at straight up defense, but is not great closing out on somebody, or that they may leave somebody open, do a little bit of gambling, trying to get the steal. And then if they don't get the steal, they give up an open shot. They have 2 scorers, it looks like, over double digits, with Von Cameron Davis that's averaging about 15, Morgan Stafford that's averaging 10. I will do a full breakdown kind of writing up all of these guys and what you need to know about them coming into this game. I will write that up and put that out over on Twitter tomorrow. So if you are interested, follow me over there. Again, this is a game where I think Alabama should win. I think it's going to be curious to see what Nate Oates does with the lineup. I think he's going to play around with it a little bit in this game as well. Hopefully not quite to the level that he did against North Dakota. I would like to at least have a lead when we start playing with this. And then the last team that I want to talk about, and we're just going to do a couple of small things to note, is against South Dakota. Something just jumps off their KenPom page immediately, right? When you look at South Dakota State, they are number 2 in the country at defensive rebounding, right? So that is somebody that if Alabama wants to try to, clean up the offensive glass, it's going to be tough, right? It's very odd when you see a team like South Dakota State that's 9-5, has lost a team to a 200th ranked KenPom team. I guess they beat McNeese State, which is a good team. Alabama played them. That's their only top 100 KenPom win. All the other games they've played inside of KenPom really haven't been super close outside of the Boise State neutral site game that they got down to a 1-point game. But in general, they have not been very good. And then they have one stat that's just elite, right? So they are an elite defensive rebounding team. That's something we definitely can take away from that game, is how well Alabama does on the offensive glass. Obviously if Alabama's making shots, then you're not as worried about the offensive rebounds. But, that is something kind of to look forward to that game. Also, it looks like Kent State does give up a ton of three-point attempts. They are currently, bottom 20 in the country at number of three-point attempts given up. So that is something definitely to note when you're looking at a team like South Dakota State. They are, is that they're going to, like I said, they're going to be willing to give up some three-point attempts. You never know when a team plays somebody like Alabama. Are they going to stay with how they currently are, or are they going to, change their norm a little bit? Because it's not super uncommon to see somebody change their norm. They usually give up a ton of three, but against Alabama, they're going to gamble and really force us to go in low, right? That's not that uncommon. So that's just something to kind of note when you look at these games is if you see somebody, if you're looking at Ken Palm, looking at Evan Mia, no matter what you're looking at, if you see a team that just gives up a ton of 3-point attempts, sometimes that changes when you play a team like Alabama, just due to the number that we want to take. They often will try to like force all their guys out and force the plays down low. I don't generally recommend it, especially for smaller teams, because Alabama can just feast in the paint if that's the case. But, it is something that has been tried, and it would not shock me if South Dakota State tries it. Don't know if they will, but it is something just kind of to note. As for South Dakota State, the thing that kind of jumps off the page to me is they have a guy that leads them in points, rebounds, assists, and blocks. And shoots over 70% from the field and almost 80% from the line, right? So he is their do-everything guy. Oscar Clough, he was at he was at Washington State last year, from Australia, 6'11", 260. Appears to be a really, really good player. He's a top 25 player in effective field goal, top 20 in true shooting, top 15 in defensive rebounding, right? These are national numbers, right? This is not based on just the region or the conference they play in, right? So at the end of the day, South Dakota State has a very nationally relevant center, averaging almost 17 a game, and he is somebody that it will be good to see what Big Cliff can do against a true center, right? This is a game that I think, again, is going to be a Cliff game. Aiden Sherrill also probably going to be needed in this game because Oscar Clough for South Dakota State is just an animal, right? It's going to be good to play somebody like that before you get into conference play because you're going to be playing guys against like Jonas Adu, like Janai Broom. You're going to be playing some really good centers in the SEC. And so having an elite center that just kind of does it all is really good to play in non-conference play because it just gets your guys ready and you see a little bit of all different types of teams to get ready for conference play. So that's what I wanted to say. I know it's a little bit shorter episode, but just wanted to get one recorded and get one put out for everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate it. As I mentioned, the next episode coming out is going to be previewing Oklahoma. So if you are interested, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Follow me over on Twitter for the pregame threads, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace.